I think that was a marvelous presentation, and you've obviously done very important work in China over the years. And I was wondering, have you been subject to harassment by the Chinese government?
Yes. Actually, there was more space to talk about the environment. There was more space to organize around environmental issues. But still, you do bump up against people who don't like questions being asked. And certainly that has happened. It's also happened because we publish in Chinese in China that you never quite know when you're going to step on a mine. For all there are no visible rules, and so it's very hard to know where the edges are. And actually, the edges move. So we were going along very nicely until one day suddenly the website was blocked, and we looked at what we'd published, and we'd published a piece on a mining accident. The mine happened to be in Tibet. And as soon as the word Tibet appeared, some low-level plod, pushed a button, and that was it. And I thought, oh, okay. So I had kind of thought this might be a bit of a catastrophe, and it was the thing you always dread. But then, at the time, 40% of our readers were in China. So I thought, well, we're going to lose, 40% of our readers. Our readership went up 20%. I thought, that's interesting. And when I was next in Beijing, an awful lot of people just had no idea we were blocked. And I realized just how much the central machine and the kind of, middle-class China sits behind VPNs all the time. And they just didn't know. And it also made us much more creative in terms of social media strategy, of content partnerships, and because we give away our material. We're a not-for-profit.
Your website is bilingual, right?
Yeah.
Chinese and English. So did they block just the Chinese?
No, they blocked the whole thing.
So how could people not have been aware it was blocked?
Because they use virtual private networks.
Oh, okay.
And actually, we had other IP addresses. We found ways around it. It actually made us much more resilient. Because by then, it's been kind of interesting in terms of digital publishing. 10 years ago, a website was like a kind of a place you went to read stuff. But these days, content is distributed, very widely in lots of different ways. And if you're not looking to sell it, you're free to distribute it as you wish. And since we're funded, we're a not-for-profit, so we're funded by foundations, by anyone we can find to fund us.
Are you an NGO?
Yeah, we're a registered charity in the UK.
What about in China?
In China, we have a commercial entity.
Are you affected by the new foreign NGO law in China?
That's a good question, to which there are a number of answers. And it sort of depends who you ask. So we have been advised in China that no, we're not affected, and we've been advised in China that yes, we are affected. So that's China. We navigate our way through this landmine, this landscape. And we shall see. We are making sincere efforts to do the right thing.
But if you're registered as a commercial entity, does that mean you pay taxes?
Yes, in China.
So you have an income stream.
You really want to know our accounts. We don't have a commercial income stream. Don't ask.
Okay. Now, you were talking about soil pollution and the food grown and all that. I was wondering, what about the tea grown in China? I mean, China exports a lot of tea, and in Hong Kong, a lot of people buy tea grown in China. Is the tea safe, or you can't really tell?
Well, I wouldn't like to, cast aspersions on the tea unless the tea. I would have it tested if you're worried about it. I mean, it depends. It depends on the soil that it's grown in. It depends on. But it's very hard to have anything organic in China when you have so much air pollution and so much, so much acid rain, so much soil pollution. It's a very hard thing to claim that something is completely organic or free from chemicals. But I think if it's of concern, I would check it out.
Right.
I also drink the tea. So.
I wouldn't know how to check it out. If I go to the supermarket and see tea, I don't know how to check it out.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be irresponsible of me to say no, don't drink the tea, because actually I don't know, what tea you're drinking or where you're getting it from.
Yeah. Now, you told the story about the American embassy,
Yeah.
and I followed that a bit, and I think that is a really interesting story because beginning in 2009, the American embassy started to put air pollution figures, what they sent out via Twitter, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry kept telling them, you can't do this.
That's right.
You're interfering in China's internal affairs.
They tried to get them under the Vienna Convention, do you remember?
Like the quality of Chinese air is a Chinese
not your
internal
business.
affair. And the embassy said, well, we want to inform American citizens about this. They said, well, inform American citizens, but don't tell the Chinese citizens about it.
Yeah, this isn't a very sustainable argument, really, is it?
Yeah. So eventually, it came out very well because eventually China was sort of put in a position where it had to make the information public, and now it does it all over the country. And I talked recently with someone who's the son of a retired leader of the party in the state. You know, in China they have several dozen people who have that label, leader of the party in the state. And this person said to me, the American embassy really did a good thing for us
Yeah.
by doing this.
Yeah, yeah. But there's been a lot of, I mean, that was a particularly kind of colourful episode. But, you know, I don't know if you know the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, which is a terrible acronym, but it's CCICD was set up after the Rio conference.
Mm-hmm.
And every year there are, you know, joint international and Chinese investigations of a particular issue, jointly agreed. There's a secretariat in Canada and there's a secretariat in Beijing, and they produce reports and policy recommendations on environmental issues, which go to the Prime Minister of the day. So I was the international co-chair on one on citizen participation and the role it would play. So we took some Chinese officials around. It was on freedom of information and citizen participation. So we took these officials around the most radical freedom of information regimes that we could find. One was in Sweden, where it's almost illegal to have a state secret. You know, you can't. You're kind of obliged to telling. And in Germany, where citizen participation is a very big thing, to try to introduce them to people for whom it was entirely normal, you know, planning officials for whom it was entirely normal to talk to citizens in the course of the planning. And not just to talk to them to explain the wisdom of the party, but to listen to them in the hope that you might get a better policy outcome. Because at the time in China, you had all these very late stage cancellations of projects, and that's, you know, that's very expensive. It's very wasteful. But people had no remedy other than going out on the streets and protesting, because there was no means of them, you know, being involved in the planning process. So we were trying to explain, and they found it very startling to be in the room where you had protesters and officials and journalists all kind of saying the same thing, you know, that this is a good thing, you know, and it was very interesting.
Okay, before I turn it over to the floor, let me ask you one more question. Is it dangerous in China to be an environmental journalist? I know that some activists have been arrested, like Wu Lihong, and he's serving in prison. What about journalists who specialize in this? Are they also running a risk?
Look, you can never say you're not running a risk, and particularly because you can step on, you know, very powerful interests, and they push back. You know, we gave a citizen journalism award to a group who had exposed in their local neighborhood fake environmental impact assessments, which were handed out by the local bureau in, you know, in collusion with the local authority. And there was a lot of unhappiness about that. You know, we walk a very sort of, I mean, in the end, it's our Chinese staff who decide where the line is.
Have any of your award winners been arrested or imprisoned or anything?
Actually, yes. There was one, but it wasn't our doing. But this was an interesting case. This was another citizen journalist, and he was a retired official, and he had chosen to spend his retirement in lovely Hainan Island, where he discovered that the mangrove swamps were being destroyed for tourist development, which was a bad thing. And he started to protest to, he was an official. He thought, I'll go and talk to the local government. They paid no attention. So he started a blog about the mangroves, which eventually attracted national attention. And so journalists started piling into Hainan Island, and, there was a kind of big fuss about it, and huge awareness raising, a lot of kind of argument. We gave him an award. A year later, he was arrested for illegal business, which consisted of handing out free copies of his book. And he got quite a large fine and a suspended sentence, and he was very shocked. I mean, this was a man who'd lived in the system all his life, who was doing what he thought was right, and suddenly this happens to him.
If he was handing out free copies of the book, it's not a business.
Oh, you might say so. Maybe you should go and be a judge in Hainan.